just thrilled to report we sort of find ourselves back in a very similar spot. We've got two very high impact campaigns kicking off. The first one building off of that success at Pell 83. Galp, the operator, has announced they'll be initiating the beginning of a four-well program at the end of November.
All right, welcome back inside our proactive newsroom. And joining me now is Robert Bose. He's the CEO of Sintana Energy. And Robert, it's great to see you again. How are you?
Very well, thanks, Steve. Very well. It's nice to see you too. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, good to have you along. I know you've been traveling out and about. You're actually in Oslo, Norway recently, talking to investors and people at a conference as well. And I'm sure they were looking at a lot of different aspects of the company, Robert, and wanted to know a lot about it.
Yeah, so just to put a little bit of detail on that, Steve, we were at the Pareto Energy Conference in Oslo last week. It's Europe's largest independent energy conference, and with that kind of setup, it's truly an amazing event in terms of its scale and scope, and close to I think 2,000 attendees over record attendance for the second year in a row. So just a very vibrant, well-attended conference, and kind of notwithstanding some of the turbulence in the markets, a really sort of constructive perspective, in particular on kind of the oil and gas business, and frankly, Sintana as well. We had great interest in terms of one-on-ones, a lot of meetings directly with investors, and then a good full room for our presentation. So yeah, it was great, nice to be back there for a second time, and it was a tremendous opportunity to focus everybody on kind of what's ahead in the next few quarters in terms of activity for us, and we're really excited about what we see.
Yeah, Robert, what was sort of the message you were sending to everyone about the next couple of quarters? Because I would imagine that you're about to step into the really busy part of the year.
No, that's absolutely right, Steve. And actually, just thinking about where we were this time last year, including with your viewers, we were talking about how we were about to kick off, the first drilling campaign on Pell 83. That was kind of going to be a two-well campaign to really kind of be the first activity on one of our licenses. And that campaign kicked off at the end of November. And within the first couple of quarters of this year, we were just absolutely thrilled to be able to announce a whole series of just absolutely fantastic outcomes, multiple light oil discoveries and high quality sands, returning fantastic reservoir parameters. And then ultimately that culminated in an appraisal location, which demonstrated an almost 8 kilometer extension of one of those discoveries that was made, in addition to a flow test, which ran at about a 14,000 barrel of oil equivalent per day infrastructure constrained limit. And so, it was just a huge beginning to the year from us. And we kind of thought, well, how do we follow up on that? But, just thrilled to report we sort of find ourselves back in a very similar spot. We've got two very high impact campaigns kicking off. The first one building off of that success at Pell 83. Galp, the operator, has announced they'll be initiating the beginning of a four-well program at the end of November. That four-well program will be entirely focused on the Mopane complex, where we had those discoveries that we announced earlier this year. It'll include two exploration locations to better kind of investigate the full extent of this enormous set of structures. They're as well going to do some appraisal drilling, which will further demonstrate the quality of the reservoir, and some more flow tests. And so that'll, as I said, kick off kind of at the end of November. And as your audience will recall, there's no capital required from us on that. So that's, a very exciting high impact catalyst on the relatively near term horizon. And for your audience members who've been following more generally what's been going on with Pell 83, there's been a lot of discussion in the press about Galp thinking about potential partners for this world-class, world-scale development. And so, they'll be kind of thinking about options for that as they continue through this program. So that's another exciting catalyst that we're really looking forward to in the beginning of next year. And then entirely separately on the license right next door, which some of your audience may remember, we have a partnership with Chevron. When we entered into this transaction, that license was operated by a UK company called Tullow. They left, and we told investors that we'd be looking to partner with someone new on that license. And we were thrilled to welcome Chevron back to Namibia. And in the intervening period, they've done a ton of work. They shot a $40 million 3D seismic shoot over this entire block, and they are teeing up a drilling campaign, which also will start at the end of November. They have entered into a rig contract with a rig called the Deep Sea Bollsta, which has been very active and at the heart of some of the very successful drilling on some of the offset blocks over the past couple of years. That rig is already in Namibia and is expected to be on location, as I said, in November. And that will be Chevron's first drilling campaign in Namibia as part of, this phase of their life there. And again, for as your viewers will recall, no capital required from us. So, really excited in terms of what we see on our blocks, two very high impact campaigns on deck. And then as well, just on the offsetting blocks, Total is started drilling another exploration well located very close to the lease line with our blocks. And then there's a company called Rhino, which has kicked off a 3D seismic campaign, and we'll be doing some exploration drilling, as well as BW Energy on some blocks which are located closer to shore. And those directly offset some recent blocks that we've gotten some interest in. So it's going to be a busy few quarters again as we look ahead, but lots to look forward to, Steve, sort of similar to where we were this time last year.
Absolutely. Lots going on there, Robert, for sure. I want to ask you, I understand that you're going to be heading off to the World Energy Summit next week. And I just wanted to ask you, um, considering what you saw in Oslo and probably what you're going to face at the World Energy Summit as well, are you seeing a greater increase around the world for what you're doing? And because obviously the world is needing a lot of different things in a lot of different areas from a lot of different people. So I'd imagine these conferences are the importance of companies like yours is starting to really, really show, and that's where the interest is really lying.
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. And, I think we're a little bit early to this idea, but it had been sort of clear to us as a result of, at least a decade, if not more, of people underinvesting in, the exploration business, as well as whatever investments that were going on were sort of in very short cycle onshore assets. There was kind of a diminishing asset base here. And, you had that coupled with most of the traditional capital providers to this industry, heading for the ESG sidelines. And so between underinvesting and no capital, there was a real deficit here. And I think what's happened over the past few years, as things like energy security and a transition which sort of thinks more fairly about how it affects, particularly the, emerging world and, the 600 million people in Africa that don't have access to electricity, it has become clear that, these large scale resources are going to be required. And so I think all of that has really driven a significant increase, not only in the part of, investors who look to invest in companies like Sintana, but as well, operators, for example, as we talked a little bit about, Galp has been thinking about some partners for, this huge opportunity on Pell 83, and that's attracted, the interest of operators from around the world. So there is interest at many levels, and it's very much, as you point out, at the heart of what we talk about at these conferences. It's much more part of the discussion, certainly, than it was 3 or 4 years ago.
Absolutely. Robert, thank you so much. What a great update. Good to have you along and get familiar with where things are going for the fall. And it's going to be an exciting one. And we'll talk again soon. Okay.
Thanks so much for having me back, Steve. It was great to see you.
All right. Robert Bose, the CEO of Sintana Energy.